I could say was, wow. Thank you. Good morning. So why didn't you go to China, huh? Sounds like a great trip. But I just got back from a great trip. Paul and I were in the St. Lawrence Seaway, Halifax, Nova Scotia, Quebec on a cruise, and it was really good to get home. And then giving this talk, it takes me a few days to prepare, and so last night I was at the dining room table and I fell asleep editing this talk for the 10th time, and I woke up and I thought, am I moving or not? That's what I did on the ship every in the middle of the night. Are we moving or not? And I looked at the sliding glass door and I opened the door and we're not moving. Isn't that funny? I mean, it was hysterical. You're in your own living room when I finally realized that. Oh, God. Always good to be home. So the topic is the journey of surrender. You know, surrender is probably one of the most misunderstood terms on the spiritual path. And it comes from the Buddhist teachings and also from Islam in terms of submission, surrender. But they're simple concepts, and they basically mean accept what is, let go, and let God. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about that and make this a whole talk. So what I find is that a lot of us don't always want to let go of control. Power and control. But sometimes when our life might feel like it's been smashed to pieces, so to speak, that's when it really gets our attention. Because we realize we really aren't in control. We aren't in control. Our spirit is in control, our mind, the creative expression of how we live. We have a lot of control over what we put into mind. And sometimes that's not always good, so what we get back may or may not always be good. But when our life seems to look like it's a wreck, the ego says, oh, if we could just control it a little more, I'm sure it'll work out just fine. But when it comes to relationships, we may not realize that some of the problems are control issues. I want you to be like me, you want me to be like you, I want you to change, you want me to change, and it can be a real difficult thing. And if the relationship isn't working, it's time to take a good look at that. You know, finding peace in a fractured relationship starts with acceptance. Acceptance of who we are, acceptance of how unique and different we are, that God created everyone unique, different, your own individual person. In order to continue in a relationship, there needs to be some agreement that I respect you, you respect me, and this is how we're going to do life, and agree on that's how it will be. But accepting our differences is so important. For example, many years ago, after my divorce, before I met my wonderful husband, Paul, I was dating, and I dated this man who loved to dance, and I loved to dance. He also had a boat, and I loved to be on the water. And he also owned his own business, and I thought, okay, we're doing good here. But after a few dates, I realized he wanted so much to control me. Every little move. And then I found out he was quite the gambler. At that time, I was new to this philosophy. And so I was using the science of mind as kind of a litmus test on how a relationship should work for me. Well, about the same time, Dr. James Golden was the minister here, and he gave a talk on how to fix other people. Now, I bet you already know the answer to that. He said, our relationship with people is the depth or lack of depth in our spiritual understanding of ourselves. We see as much beauty and joy in people as we have beauty and joy in ourselves. And when the relationship is not going well, we tend to dwell on how they can make me happier. Does that ring a bell? It would be well if you just made me happier and then this would all work just fine. Well, Dr. James said there's a golden rule in the metaphysical belief of relationships, and that is leave people alone. He said it's a waste of time to worry if things could be different if only you would change. It's a waste of time trying to tell people how they should be when we often don't know how we should be. We aren't looking at ourselves. So being judgmental of others doesn't help in a relationship, and usually the other people doesn't want our ideas of how they should be anyway. So for me, it was obvious that this person who wanted control over me, it wasn't going to be easy to change him. How could I turn someone into someone they're not? Thank goodness for Science of Mind, and thank goodness for Dr. James. Because what can happen is my desire to change another person creates a lot of tension, and it can be depressing when they say, no, thank you, or something like that. So thanks to Dr. James' talk, I surrendered to what was and appropriately decided, bye-bye, have a good life. So surrender isn't passive. It's seeing reality as it is and where we need to take action. The spiritual path is never one where other people can run over us, although it can look that way sometimes. You know, an example I was thinking might be kayaking on the Sacramento River. We have to steer or control the kayak because that's a fast-moving river, and it's very, very cold, and you don't want to get thrown overboard or hit rocks or anything. So if we try to avoid how fast the river's running, we might as just well sit on the riverbank and watch it go by. So the trick is to accept what is and submit to the current. Then let us easily get pulled along. It's not giving up. Surrender is never giving up. I came across an article on the internet when I was researching this by Lisa Sullivan, and it was all about spiritual surrender, which she calls the link to living a peaceful life. Just like Eckhart Tolle, being in the present moment. Start with being in the present moment. See each moment as it is, and don't worry about the future moments. In the present moment, it's where our beliefs and our ideas go into the creative process and come back to us. So when we're in a state of surrender, it's always, like for Lisa, God, thy will be done. Thy will be done. Now, Lisa came to this place of surrender in a very difficult way. She was an incessant worrier who grew up in a household that was riddled with fear. Her dad was an independent insurance agent, and he was always worried about what might happen that might cost them something or something terrible that might happen, and what could they do before anything bad happened to stop it from happening. So you can see that cyclical fear going on and on. So safety was a big issue in her family, and she never felt safe as a child. I can't imagine what that's like. She was depressed, she would have panic attacks. Something bad's gonna happen. Are we covered by our insurance? You know, that kind of a feeling. So it was only when she came to this idea of complete surrender in the moment that she started to be able to overcome it. The breaking point was when her son joined the military just a few days before 9/11, and she was faced with the thought of him going to war. And her son called her just as she was writing this article on surrender, and he said, "Mom, what's the name of the cemetery in town?" And she said, "Why?" He says, "I'm filling out this form for the Army, and they want to know where I want to be buried and how." Talk about a freak out for Mom. She said all of a sudden losing a child was just utmost in her mind, and it was very scary. But then when she mastered her fear, like the fear of being unsafe, she'd sit back and find that place inside where God's in control. There was nothing to fear. You know, it reminded me of Judge Thomas Troward. If you've ever taken Troward's classes, a brilliant, brilliant man, sometimes hard to study because of his brilliance in the early 1900s, but he had a son, Rupert, and he was going into World War I. Very, very difficult war, a bloody war. And Dr. Troward wrote him a letter, and here's part of it. Put your whole trust in him and fear not. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Keep a constant dwelling in thought upon the continual presence of God with you and around you. Remember Christ's words, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." First, find God in yourself, and you will find him everywhere else. And he returned from the war safely. But back to Lisa. We can live each moment in peace and not worrying. And when we can live in peace in the moment, everything runs beautifully. Life, you're just kind of in the flow, like making every green light downtown Reading. When we realize our life is evolving perfectly, based on our dreams and wishes and thoughts and beliefs and judgments from the past, we can feel at peace. We don't have to rehash the past and the negative things that happened, because in the tune of the harmony of life, there was nothing wrong spiritually with what happened. So when we live in the moment, we are at peace with ourselves, and that's what surrender is about. You probably have heard of Marianne Williamson in her book, Return to Love. And she said, surrender means the decision to stop fighting the world and start loving it instead. Now, that was a treat for this presidential candidate that kind of flashed across this and talking about love, but she's just right on with the power of love. And if you're fairly new to us here at the center, one of the things you might hear said is, what you resist persists. And it's true, what we resist persists. Why? Because we're giving it energy. We're thinking about it, we're worrying about it, we're resisting, we're giving it all this energy. And the creative process says, what you're focused on, you're telling us you want more of. It's the attractive factor. I remember when a wonderful lady a couple years ago was going to go to the women's retreat, and she said, I can't go because I have back issues, and I know that bed will just keep me in pain the whole weekend. She said, I just got so much pain. And I said, well, have you prayed about it? And she says, oh yeah, yep, I do prayer work on it. I said, what do you say? No more pain, no more pain, no more pain. And subconscious mind hears, pain, pain, here's some more. You know, it's how that works. And when you finally realize it, it's like, oh wow, what was I thinking? In the center, we have our board of trustees, we have many committees, and you know, anytime you're working on a committee, there's every personality plus in that committee, and everybody has different ideas of how things should be, but I'm always pleasantly surprised when I get the notes from the Bliss team meetings. The Bliss team is a group of very enthusiastic people who get together and think new fun things for us to do. New activities, and they pour their heart into them and they make them work. And when I read the minutes from their meeting, I can tell no one controlled the meeting. No one said it's my way or the highway. No one said you're wrong, I'm right. It was a general love fest of what would be fun to do, and people agree. And I think that's one of the most beautiful experiences of surrender. Beautiful experiences of surrender. I was looking on Deepak Chopra's website in researching this topic of surrender, and one of his educators explained it this way. In the spiritual context, surrender means give up everything that no longer serves us. That's something to think about. What is it you're clinging to that no longer serves you? He says, let go of the smallness of life. Embrace the totality of it. The joy of surrender is the positive feelings we feel when we let go of what doesn't serve us. We stop forcing solutions on things that are just a control issue. Because the ego just loves to be in control, just loves it. But surrender allows us to break free into what Deepak Chopra calls the wisdom of uncertainty, to be in that space of uncertainty. Because if we know it's all good, as dear Emma says, not knowing what's going to happen is uncertain, but we can be excited about it, we can be happy about it, we can feel good about it. So now that you know what surrender is, how do you do it? That's the next question. And the first answer is, Sri Aurobindo says, you got to have faith. You have to have faith. There's no need to think it through. We have faith in God. We have faith in the process. We have faith in a loving God, a good God. We have faith. So there's not a need to do anything else but have faith. We also need patience. Faith and patience complement each other. I didn't put these two together. Both are a cause and both are an effect. If you have faith, you end up with patience. If you have patience, you end up with faith. So I thought that was very interesting. Sri Aurobindo says that in itself is a complete code of conduct for our life. Next, we have to be aware. What's really happening? What is really going on? We need to be focused, because the normal concept of surrender is to contract, to give up, but it's really one of expansion. The more we are aware, our ideas, our options open, they expand. And then there's meditation, the complete act of surrender. It's probably one of the most powerful tools that we have in our toolbox. Because when we quiet our mind and we stretch that space between our thoughts, good things come through. I always love to ask a question, sit down, meditate, and as soon as I get the monkey mind gone, the space between my words, my thoughts expands, and I get some really good stuff from Spirit. It's just like a good intuitive hit or something that I hadn't thought of before. So meditation is a really good act of surrender to a higher level of intelligence in our life. It's where the I and me kind of disappear and you feel the oneness. And then the next one is to offer everything to the divine. Offer everything that we do, say, feel, all our activities, offer it up to the grace of God. Because nothing really belongs to us. Nothing. Nothing belongs to us. So whatever we do in goodness, greatness, and surrender and love and charity, we just offer it up and not cling to it. And then the key word is to trust. Trust in the process. Trust and surrender go hand in hand. How could you do one without the other? It's like we always talk about seed, soil, plant. We plant the seed of our belief in the soil of subconscious mind and we water it with our attention. And what manifests is a plant, seed, soil, plant. So if we have faith in it, we know that our most important and cherished desires will manifest. And so this brought me to remembering Ernest Holmes' last talk at Asilomar. I don't know why it came up at this point in this talk, but I'm like, oh, the Sermon of the Sea, Sermon by the Sea. It was his last talk in 1959 at Asilomar. And he said this. It's a whole booklet, but I'm just going to give you a little bit. Find me one person who is for something and against nothing, who is redeemed enough not to condemn others out of the burden of their soul, and I will find you an exalted human being. Why? Because he will have revealed to me the nature of God and proved the possibilities of all human beings. Oh, he had such great trust and faith. So it's through the process of surrender that we literally come to experience a life without limits, infinite potentiality, lasting joy, inner peace, unlimited prosperity. Because prosperity is not just money, it's just the bliss of being alive every day. So join me in a prayer for that. We always start a prayer with the oneness of God, the one who's created all of us, everything in the universe. And every person, no two alike, infinite potentiality. So knowing that the infinite intelligence of the universe created each one of us to live our own lives and to find peace, harmony, surrender, beauty, joy, is just a phenomenal realization. And today and every day I ask myself, is that who I am? Am I being the peace? Am I giving up control of anything other than myself? Am I offering gratitude? Am I loving others? This is surrender to the characteristics of who God is. And it is good. And so today I accept for myself and everyone here a higher realization of that. And if it takes surrender to see the goodness in every part of life, so be it. Because through that, we will find peace. Deep, deep inner peace. So I'm so grateful for this teaching, for the words of Dr. Holmes, of all the wise people throughout history who knew this thing we think is a secret and apply it in our lives. So I release these words to the universe knowing they're going to be helpful to anyone who wants to surrender and feel the peace and the love of God. And for that, I am grateful. And so it is. Thank you.
That was so perfect and beautiful, following that surrender. Make me an instrument. I'd like to invite the ushers up. And then repeat this offering affirmation after me. Gratefully I give. With an attitude of abundance. For I know as I give, I do receive. And so it is.
The piece you'll hear under the offertory in just a moment here is a canon of peace, as it were. Don't worry. I'm not going to fire a cannon at you, but it's a canon is a piece where you take some material and repeat it. So this is a kind of canon that's known as a round, just like row your boat. It's called Dona Nobis Pacem. It means grant us peace.